So I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Luminate. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be in a room together again. Absolutely joyful. I have to say, though, I'm also a bit nervous because I haven't given a presentation like this for a long time. So hopefully all will go well. Some of you know us very well, and some of you are new faces, I think, to Luminate, and that's great to see. So I thought I would just begin by telling you a tiny bit about the organisation. Let me see if this is going to work. There we are. So this is our purpose, our statement of purpose, our vision statement. And I'm just going to read it, actually. Luminate works across Scotland to ensure that older people's creativity can flourish, whatever their circumstances, experience, interests, and ambitions. We were set up back in 2012, as Jim mentioned, and we initially ran a nationwide creative ageing festival. Over time, I'm not going to give you all the history, but we have made a big change over the last few years, and we now work all year round, running developmental projects in a wide range of settings. We offer training for artists and for other professionals working in creative ageing contexts. We support the creative development of older professional artists, and we run Scotland's Dementia Inclusive Singing Network. So I think creative ageing is a very wide-ranging term and a very wide-ranging area of work. And I think you can see that actually by the range of all of you in this room and the different practices that you bring to the table. The last 3 years have been very tough. They've been tough for the cultural sector. They've been tough for older people. They've been tough for everyone. And I feel like we're moving into a little bit of a new era. There are significant challenges, as Jim's already referenced. But there's also joy in coming together again, as we're beginning to do and doing today. So I'm going to share some thoughts and some questions. I'm not going to try and give answers, really. I did think I should probably call this presentation Anne's Ramblings, but I feel that coming out of the last 3 years, I do have a lot of questions about where this work is heading and the impact of the last 3 years on the future progression of this work. We were set up, Luminate was set up in response to the fact that data shows that older people engage in the arts less than younger people. The Scottish Household Survey every year continues to show that. There's a drop-off in engagement as we get older. And that was the motivation for Luminate being set up all those years ago. We take a rights-based approach to our work. So we believe that older people have a right of access to culture and creative activities, regardless of their circumstances or where they live. In this context, we're quite excited actually to know that the Scottish Government has committed to introducing a new human rights bill for Scotland, and many of you will be aware of this, some of you may not. The plan is to incorporate 4 existing treaties, one of which, I'm going to read this, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, the UK is already a signatory to that treaty, but this is going to be embedded in Scots law in the next 2 or 3 years, which I think is a very exciting thing, certainly is for our work. So I've done this job since 2012, 11 years, it's a long time. And there's no doubt that creative ageing practice has grown across Scotland in that time. More artists and cultural organisations are involved, working collaboratively with more community, health and social care colleagues. The impact of the pandemic, I think, has definitely increased our awareness of the potential positive impacts of the arts in terms of health and well-being. And the growth in initiatives such as social prescribing has similarly, I think, led the arts sector to think a lot more about how we might work with communities, what our roots are to working with communities, and, in these challenging times, funding. Now, there are some huge positives in that, but I have a concern. And my concern is that I wonder whether the arts sector's growing focus on the health and well-being impacts of the work that we're all doing in this room risks overemphasising some of the health conditions that can come with ageing, and inadvertently, therefore, is risking contributing to a medical model of ageing. I also worry about what this says about our view of artistic practice. So many of you in this room are professional artists, including quite a few who've come to your art form late, or perhaps have returned to an art form that you maybe studied when you were younger and have come to it, as I say, back to it later in your life. I suspect that many of you would agree that it contributes to your well-being, but I also suspect that's probably not your primary motivation for doing it. You can shout me down on that later if I'm wrong. I want to stress that I'm absolutely not being negative about arts and health programmes. They are so important. They are very impactful. It's an area of work for us as well. You know, some of our work very definitely falls into that arena. But my concern is that I am increasingly hearing creative ageing work being described almost entirely in terms of the health and social benefits that it brings. What happens when we start to measure success entirely on the basis of number of GP visits or somebody being less lonely? It's really important. It's really important to the quality of people's lives. But are we narrowing our thinking and the way we talk about the impact of our work? Self-expression, a sense of identity, story-making, imagination, joy, you can all add to that list. I wonder if we're beginning to do ourselves a bit of a disservice. I've been very lucky in the few years I've been in this job to have been able to travel a bit and to see work elsewhere. And these reflections on health and well-being and where this might be taking where this focus might be taking us have led me to reflect quite a lot on a trip I made to Japan, supported by the Behring Foundation and the British Council a few years ago. We were lucky during that trip to meet Yukio Ninagawa, who those of you who work in theatre may know as a world-renowned theatre director. He was the artistic director of Saitama Theatre, Saitama Arts Theatre, prefecture in the kind of in the outskirts of Tokyo, and he became artistic director at the age of 70. And he came into that job asking himself a question about whether older people who'd not been trained as performers could bring something to a stage that younger people, however talented and well-trained, couldn't bring. And he set up this amazing company called the Saitama Gold Theatre. Very sadly, it no longer exists. It wrapped up during the pandemic. But he set up this incredible company, and people came. He auditioned. These were all people who hadn't performed, but they were auditioned. They came from all over Japan to audition and to become part of this company, and people relocated. And we met some of them, and hearing them talk about the work and the impact it had on them, undoubtedly it was affecting their well-being. Undoubtedly it was. You could hear them talk about the purpose that it brought. You could hear them talk about the connection that it brought. But that wasn't why they did it or why Yukio Ninagawa set that project up. It was set up absolutely with an artistic imperative. And as I say, it's something I've been reflecting on a lot quite recently. Of course, there are examples like that. I'm not for a minute saying that there aren't examples of that kind of work going on in Scotland. We've got representatives of Prime here today, the Flames, who are based in Glasgow and work all across Scotland. There are some great examples, but I worry about the balance, and I worry about the shift that is potentially happening because of the ways that maybe COVID has made us think, and also the financial challenges that we're all facing and the potential of looking at different sources of income for money. So I want to finish with some questions that I'm not going to try and answer, as I said at the start, but I hope they'll maybe be a trigger for discussion across the day. Leaving the issue of funding aside. I skipped a slide. Leaving the issue of funding aside. How do all of us in this room make sure that creative ageing practice in Scotland reflects and responds to the diverse experiences of ageing? How do we make sure that we offer creative opportunities that enable older people's wide-ranging ambitions to be fulfilled? From those who want to sing in a choir in their local community to those who want to develop skills as a professional artist. And how do we make sure that those opportunities also recognise that somebody may be frail and possibly living with a health condition, but they can still have a fulfilled creative life, and indeed they have a right to that creative life? How do we make sure that we're not inadvertently suggesting that ageing is a medical process and that the role of the arts is only to fix the challenges of a particular condition? And I guess I would encapsulate that in a kind of overarching question, which is how do we ensure that every older person in Scotland is able to exercise their right to have the cultural life that they want? Yeah. Thank you.